Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Duke, and we are together again for The Takeaway with Alex Newman. And sorry to break the news to you, ladies and gentlemen, but the educational news gets worse and worse. Today, we talk to you about Ballou High School in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, one of the most corrupt big liberal cities in the history of the world, and what they're doing. This school, Ballou High School in Washington, D.C., Alex, it's a big pet project of liberals. It's a big NPR-supported school. Talk a little bit about Ballou High School and the crisis there.
Sure, thanks, Duke. And, you know, this school, they were singing its praises a couple of years ago. Oh, what a wonderful school. It's a sign of progress and how we can overcome, bad education and all the rest of it. And they said, look, everybody graduated. Wow, what a historic accomplishment. And then they found out that actually nobody really should have graduated, right? Basically, they just gave diplomas to everybody. Didn't matter if you came to school. Didn't matter if you didn't pass a single class. Didn't matter if you were not suitable in any way for graduating from high school. They handed you a diploma and said, good luck, good job. And then based on these phony diplomas, the kids got into college, and where they're basically guaranteed of failure unless the college is like the high school and just graduates everybody regardless. So.
Well, that's right. And so just to clarify, so the NPR didn't necessarily fund the school, but organizations like National Public Radio have been singing the praises of this school as a success story. In Washington, D.C. school, it's primarily an African-American school, right? A minority inner-city school. And there were huge percentages of kids at this school, who didn't show up. Most of the time, if ever, kids who were not proficient in a single subject, kids who were woefully, we're talking years and years and years behind where they should be educationally, and the school just decided to give them all diplomas. Whether you were there or not, whether you came or not, whether you did your homework or not, whether you could pass a test or not, whether you could read or not, they gave you diplomas, and almost all of these kids have gotten into college, which tells you something about where we are at the university level. You bring these kids in to satisfy quotas, diversity, trophy hunting. You bring these kids in, and then inevitably, you have to spend your time at universities giving them scholarships, paying for their books, giving them diversity awards and accolades, and then teaching them remedial math and reading and English and history. This is the system, and inevitably it pulls down the university system. But all of this, our progressive elites have decided, all of this, the destruction of college, the lowering of college education, the destruction of elementary, middle, and high school, the pulling it down, the ruining of our kids' futures educationally, all that's okay if everybody comes out the same cheap, low, unimpressive, ineffective kind of education.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I forget the exact numbers off the top of my head now, but I think it was more than half of the students who graduated actually did not even come to school the required number of days. In fact, I forget if it was like if they miss more than 6 weeks out of the school year, then they have to be expelled or whatever. Well, more than half of the students fell in that category. And instead of being expelled, they got a high school diploma. And you're right. I mean, this doesn't accomplish anything positive for anyone. Yeah, everybody said, ooh, look, a school that graduated everybody. But, the truth eventually came out. Now even the kids that really worked hard look like fools. Who's going to want to take a high school diploma from a school known for giving out fraudulent high school diplomas? The city government, if you will. I said, we're going to do an investigation. But, some background on the city government I think might be helpful, too, for people to realize just how it's almost like a parody of itself. It's so ridiculous. So the state education agency, they came out with a report. They said more than 2/3 of adult residents of Washington, D.C., people over 15 years old, are functionally illiterate. So the overwhelming majority of this city cannot read. I mean, they cannot read anything. Forget a newspaper, forget a book, forget the Constitution, the Bible, anything like that. They can't read anything. And so, obviously, they had a crisis, right? Some of the worst schools, most terrible schools in a country filled with terrible schools. And they said, we have an idea. We will go visit one of the most brutal, oppressive, mass-murdering communist dictatorships in the world and see if they can give us some tips. So they went down to Cuba on an official visit. They visited the schools in Cuba. They said, look how nice all these kids, they're doing so well in these government schools. And, of course, the kids were literally singing praises to Fidel Castro, their supreme overlord. This is why the schools are graduating kids who can't read, because they're turning for inspiration to mass murdering communist dictatorships, because they're using methods to teach reading that have been exposed as quackery for more than 150 years. And nothing is going to change as long as this fraud continues. Giving everybody a fake diploma is not going to make anybody better educated. In fact, it's just going to expose the system quicker. And, I'm happy to see this scandal emerging now. It's been in all the big newspapers and everything. But, it's the tip of the iceberg. It's representative of what's happening all across the country, even if it hasn't gotten quite that bad in Louisiana or Oregon or California.
Well, we know California is as bad. We've seen some of the statistics there as well. But this is really telling that school officials in Washington, D.C., officials in charge of our kids' education in the public schools, had decided that they were going to go to Cuba to find out how best to educate those kids. And the one thing Cuban kids know is their socialist doctrine. So I guess it's not that much of a stretch, given Common Core, that ideology trumps everything else. The other thing that's really frustrating to me is, how is this not racist? These paternalistic progressive educrats in one of the most dysfunctional progressive big cities in the world, these progressive educrats who feel that it's okay to give kids who can't perform academically diplomas so that they don't get held back. This is the worst kind of white liberal paternalist racism, right? That these kids have not been able to, we haven't taught them. The school system, the government school systems have failed these kids. Progressive, big government, public education has failed these minority kids. And our response to this criminal abuse of children by failing to give them an education is to hand them a diploma and to open the doors to a college education that is similarly going to be watered down. It is absolutely, absolutely impossible to grasp how this kind of benevolent liberalism is nothing more than the worst kind of racism. Crass, racist bigotry.
It is. It is absolutely bigotry. I mean, they talk about the bigotry of low expectations. You can talk about that on steroids in this case. They basically assume, well, these kids are never going to amount to anything. They can't do anything. We'll just have to give them fake diplomas. I mean, it's the height of racism. But you're right. I mean, I would say that there's a number of crimes being perpetrated here, and I would say that the taxpayers deserve a refund. Right? The taxpayers, presumably Washington D.C. and probably the rest of the country too. I'm sure U.S. taxpayers subsidize this wasteland that is Washington, D.C. We paid to allegedly educate these children. Nobody got an education there. They got a fake diploma. We deserve our money back. That's a scam, right? If I, as a businessman, went out and said, hey, I'm going to sell you this product, and then I just gave you an empty box, you'd say, hey, I want my money back, right? And if I didn't give it to you, you'd take me to court. So why are we allowing these criminals to ride off into the sunset with our money without having provided what they said they were going to provide? It's disgraceful. But I'll add one more thing, Duke, and this is incredibly ironic, and it's really sad. It's tragic. But you know what? The kids at this high school are probably better off than their peers in other government high schools who actually went to school because they avoided the indoctrination. So yeah, they won't know anything. That's fine. Neither will the other kids who did go to class. But the kids who did go to class will know all about, man-made global warming. Humans are bad. We need global government. We need population control. We need socialism a la Cuba, where the average income is, $10 a month, right? So these kids who never went to school will probably be better off in the long run, not having suffered so much indoctrination than the poor victims who really did go to their government indoctrination center. And that is a devastating testament to the state of the education system in the United States.
Alex, such a naive child you are. These kids have all gotten into college. They're going to get their indoctrination, trust me. They're going to get a lot more of that in their colleges than they are proficiency in anything else. So, Mom and Dad America, are you listening now? And now, Mom and Dad America, you understand why expectations and the standards, what's being taught to your kids in your public schools seems to be much lower than when you went, because this is the model. The public schools are not designed anymore to give your kids a first-rate education. They are designed to level your kids off. When Washington, D.C. public school officials are going to Castro's Cuba to figure out how to educate your kids, you can bet that education, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or Omaha, Nebraska, is going to be high on ideology and very, very, very short on actual achievement. Alex, thank you so much for another great takeaway. If you enjoyed that video, I encourage you to join our Patriot Club at FreedomProject.com. We have some wonderful gifts and perks for your membership. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for watching.